Governments love the word classified because it sounds serious, clean, and official. What it usually means is, please do not look in this drawer. There is a nuclear accident, a secret army, or a corpse pretending to run an empire. These are 32 government secrets that were never supposed to get out. From buried disasters to cover-ups so absurd they feel like history was written by a drunk spy with a shovel. 1. On October 24, 1960, at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Soviet Kazakhstan, the Soviet Union managed to turn a rocket launch into the deadliest space-age disaster almost nobody was allowed to know about. An R-16 intercontinental ballistic missile exploded on the pad after Marshal Mitrofan, Netherlands, pushed crews to rush safety checks for a political deadline, because apparently nothing says responsible missile program like hurrying a giant tube of death for party optics. A faulty signal fired the second stage engines while workers were still crawling around the rocket. The fireball wiped out at least 78 people, with some estimates climbing far higher, including elite engineers and designers. Netherlands died too, reportedly identified only by his medals. Moscow claimed he had perished in a plane crash. The truth stayed buried until 1989, when Glasnost finally cracked open the vault. 30 years of silence, all because political pressure outranked basic survival. 2. For years, North Korea insisted it had absolutely nothing to do with Japanese citizens vanishing from beaches and quiet coastal towns. Families begged for answers. Investigators pointed toward Pyongyang, and North Korea performed its usual diplomatic shrug, like a country caught with jam on its face. Then, in 2002, during a summit with Japanese Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi, Kim Jong-il casually admitted that yes, North Korean agents had abducted at least 13 Japanese people in the 1970s and 1980s. Why? Because spies needed authentic Japanese language, habits, accents, and cultural details. So instead of hiring teachers, they kidnapped random civilians, including a 13-year-old girl. Kim blamed overzealous agents and apologized, which is a neat way to describe state-sponsored human snatching. Only 5 of the 13 were confirmed alive. North Korea claimed the rest had died. Japan believes the real number is much higher, and many families still have no answers. 3. In the 1940s and 1950s, Sweden decided to answer a deeply mysterious scientific question. Does sugar damage teeth? And somehow, instead of using normal observation, researchers at Vipeholm Hospital chose human experimentation on people with intellectual disabilities. Patients who could not meaningfully consent were fed huge amounts of specially designed sticky toffees and caramels. Not just candy, but candy engineered like a dental war crime, built to cling to teeth and cause maximum damage. The results were exactly as awful as any functioning adult could have predicted. Teeth rotted, blackened, and decayed across the patient population. The findings then shaped Swedish dental policy for decades. Even better, part of the funding came from the Swedish sugar industry, which liked the idea that cavities came from how often sugar was eaten, not from sugar itself. Sweden got its research. Industry got a useful angle, the patients got ruined mouths. 4. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, his followers handled his burial with the calm, relaxed energy of a government deleting a hard drive with a flamethrower. According to later accounts connected to Marco Polo, Mongol traditions, and Chinese sources, the funeral escort carrying his body back to Mongolia killed every person and animal they encountered so nobody could reveal the route. After the burial, possibly with immense treasure, the workers who dug the grave were reportedly executed. Then the soldiers who killed those workers were supposedly killed too, because apparently witness control needed multiple layers of murder. Some stories say a river was redirected over the tomb. Others say horses trampled the ground until every trace vanished. Nearly 800 years later, satellites, radar, archaeologists, and obsessed treasure hunters still have not found the grave. Whatever they were hiding, the Mongols created one of history's most brutally effective state secrets. 5. For more than 7 centuries, the Byzantine Empire guarded a military secret so terrifying that enemy sailors probably needed a minute to rethink their career choices. It was called Greek fire, a liquid weapon sprayed from ships through pressurized nozzles. And yes, it burned on water. Imagine attacking Constantinople, and suddenly the sea itself catches fire, like Poseidon had a bad day. Greek fire helped save the city during multiple Arab sieges, and maybe one of the main reasons the Byzantine Empire survived as long as it did. The formula was protected with paranoid precision. Only the emperor and a tiny group of specialists knew the full truth. And production was split between teams, so no one person could recreate it alone. When Constantinople fell in 1453, the recipe disappeared with the empire. Modern historians and chemists still argue over petroleum, resins, and quicklime. The Byzantines guarded the secret so well, they accidentally erased it forever. 6. During the Cold War, the Dutch government secretly built a large underground bunker beneath a public park to protect the royal family and top officials during a nuclear attack. Very serious, very classified, very end of the world. But then came the awkward engineering problem. People hiding underground still need air, and ventilation shafts sticking out of a park tend to look a little suspicious. So the government disguised the vents as ordinary trash cans. For years, regular citizens walked around tossing sandwich wrappers and coffee cups into bins that were secretly helping a classified doomsday shelter breathe. Somewhere beneath their feet, the monarchy's survival plan depended on nobody becoming too curious about municipal garbage infrastructure. It is hard not to admire the absurd elegance of it. Other countries built intimidating bunkers with blast doors and armed guards. The Netherlands apparently said, "What if the apocalypse comes through the trash can?" 7. In 1968, after North Korea sent commandos to assassinate South Korea's president, South Korea answered with a plan so insane it sounds like a rejected revenge movie. The government recruited 31 men, mostly petty criminals and unemployed young men, and promised them money, fresh lives, and a mission to assassinate Kim Il-sung. They were sent to a secret training camp on Silmido Island, where training became 3 years of brutality with a patriotic label slapped on top. Then politics changed, the mission was canceled, and the men were simply left there. Abandoned, furious, and trained for violence, they revolted in 1971, killed guards, escaped the island, hijacked a bus, and headed towards Seoul. The military stopped them, and most died after detonating grenades during the standoff. The government buried the story for over 30 years. Only after the 2003 film, Silmido did the public fully confront this nightmare. 8. On January 17, 1966, a United States B-52 bomber collided with a refueling tanker over Spain, and 4 thermonuclear hydrogen bombs dropped near the fishing village of Palomares. That is not a sentence any tourism board wants to hear. 2 bombs hit the ground and their conventional explosives detonated, spreading radioactive plutonium over farmland. A 3rd landed intact. A 4th vanished into the Mediterranean Sea, sending the United States Navy on an 80-day underwater treasure hunt, except the treasure was a missing nuclear bomb. Spain's Franco regime desperately wanted to avoid panic and protect tourism. So Tourism Minister Manuel Fraga staged a public swim at Palomares Beach with the American ambassador. Look, everyone, totally safe water. Please ignore the nuclear incident. It was not totally safe. Contamination remained for decades, and cleanup disputes continued long after. Few Cold War cover stories are darker or more ridiculous than officials splashing around to sell calm. 9. For decades, Switzerland kept a secret that was explosive in the most literal sense possible. Many major bridges, tunnels, highway overpasses, and mountain passes were secretly fitted with demolition charges. The plan was simple. If an enemy invaded, Switzerland would blow up its own roads and crossings, turning the country into a beautiful alpine maze of rubble and regret. Thousands of structures were prepared for destruction. Ordinary people drove over bridges every day without knowing the whole thing could, in theory, be erased at the push of a button. After the Cold War, the government gradually removed the explosives, but some charges remained in border bridges until December 2014. So yes, for much of the 20th century, Switzerland was basically a giant booby trap with excellent chocolate. Neutral does not mean helpless. In this case, it meant, we will destroy our own infrastructure before you enjoy it. 10. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union maintained entire cities that officially did not exist, because apparently secrecy is easier when you just delete geography. These places were known as closed administrative territorial formations. Arzyma 16, Chelyabinsk 65, Krasnoyarsk 26, and others contained schools, hospitals, theaters, apartment blocks, and hundreds of thousands of people, yet they appeared on no public maps. Mail went through fake postal addresses. Residents could not tell outsiders where they lived. Visitors needed permission. The cities were built around nuclear weapons facilities, plutonium plants, missile research centers, and biological weapons labs. Some were larger than many normal cities that actually got the privilege of being printed on paper. Russia still has dozens of officially acknowledged closed cities today. The Soviet state did not merely hide secret laboratories. It hid the whole town, the population, the address, and apparently reality itself. 11. For over 15 years, Sweden was convinced Soviet submarines were sneaking through its waters. Strange underwater sounds kept appearing, popping, hissing, odd acoustic signals that did not seem to match known ships or marine life. The Swedish Navy spent around $1.2 billion on anti-submarine operations, relations with Moscow grew tense, and the public lived with a constant background hum of underwater Cold War anxiety. Officials held briefings, showed sonar evidence, and warned about hidden Russian threats beneath the waves. Then scientists finally delivered one of the most humiliating military explanations ever. It was herring. Massive schools of Baltic herring were releasing gas from their swim bladders. In normal language, Sweden had spent years chasing fish farts, not submarines, not elite Soviet infiltrators. Fish. Once the sound was properly identified, reports of hostile underwater intrusions suddenly collapsed. It turns out the enemy fleet was extremely small, very smelly, and covered in scales. 12. The Inca Empire managed a vast state without a written alphabet, which is already impressive enough. Instead, it stored government records, taxes, census data, military information, and possibly even stories in quipu. Bundles of colored, knotted strings made from cotton or llama hair. Knot type, color, spacing, and position could encode complex information. Specialists called quipucameocs were trained to read them, making these people basically living government databases with excellent finger memory. Then the Spanish conquistadors arrived, looked at this sophisticated information system, and decided it was probably demonic. In 1583, the Third Council of Lima ordered quipus burned as idolatrous objects. So a unique administrative technology, possibly holding centuries of knowledge, was destroyed in bonfires of holy ignorance. The Inca had built one of history's strangest and most secure record systems. The invaders responded with, "Interesting strings, better set them on fire." 13. In the 1950s, Canada built the Avro Arrow, a supersonic interceptor so advanced that Canadian aerospace engineers briefly looked like they were about to embarrass the rest of the planet. The CF-105 could fly close to twice the speed of sound, carried cutting-edge systems, and represented a huge leap in aircraft design. Then, on February 20th, 1959, remembered in Canadian aviation as Black Friday, Prime Minister John Diefenbaker's government suddenly cancelled the program. Officially, costs were rising, and missile defense was becoming more important. Unofficially, fear of Soviet espionage helped push the panic button. But cancellation was not enough. The government ordered every completed aircraft destroyed. Prototypes were cut apart with blowtorches, blueprints were shredded, tooling was scrapped. Nearly 14,000 workers and engineers lost their jobs, and many went to the United States Space Agency NASA or American aerospace firms. Canada did not just cancel its masterpiece, it murdered it and swept up the parts. 14. For 34 years from 1669 until 1703, a mysterious prisoner was held in French prisons under direct orders from King Louis XIV. He wore a mask whenever others could see him, probably velvet or black cloth, rather than literal iron. But honestly, the branding was strong either way. Guards were warned that if he tried to reveal his identity, he was to be killed. He received decent treatment and comfortable quarters, which only made the secrecy feel stranger. When he died, officials destroyed everything in his cell. Furniture was burned, walls were scraped and whitewashed, and even the floor was torn up. The French state basically admitted, yes, there was a prisoner, and no, you may never know who he was. Theories have ranged from a hidden royal relative to a disgraced official or general. 3 centuries later, the man in the mask remains one of Europe's most irresistible unsolved government mysteries. 15. In the 1980s, Soviet engineers at a military academy designed real laser pistols for cosmonauts. Not toys, not movie props, actual experimental weapons for space. The pistols used pyrotechnic flashbulb cartridges to create a focused beam of light through a fiber optic barrel. Their purpose was to blind enemy astronauts, damage optical sensors on hostile satellites, and possibly burn through parts of a spacesuit during close encounters in orbit. A magazine-fed model held 8 shots, and there was also a revolver-style version because apparently even space weapons needed options. The project stayed classified until details appeared in Russian sources after the Soviet Union collapsed. The Cold War had become so deranged that military planners were seriously preparing for laser gunfights in zero gravity. Somewhere in an archive, prototypes of Soviet space laser pistols exist. And somehow that is real history, not a Saturday morning cartoon written by paranoid engineers. 16. In 1566, Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent died inside his tent during the siege of a Hungarian fortress. He had been one of the most powerful rulers on earth, but his Grand Vizier, Sokollu Mehmed Pasha, immediately faced a practical problem. A dead sultan is terrible for army morale, so he kept it secret for 48 days. Orders were issued in Suleiman's name, with the vizier reportedly forging his handwriting. The body was dressed in royal robes, quietly embalmed, and according to some accounts, propped near a tent window so soldiers could believe their ruler was still watching over them. Doctors were not saving him. They were helping the cover story not smell. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of Ottoman soldiers continued a campaign supposedly led by a corpse. The deception held long enough for Suleiman's son to reach the throne. One of history's great armies spent weeks taking orders from a dead man. Bureaucracy, but make it haunted. 17. In the late 1960s, American spy satellites photographed something over the Caspian Sea that looked like the Soviet Union had lost a bet with physics. It was enormous, weighed over 500 tons, and moved just meters above the water at high speed. Too big to be a normal aircraft, too fast to be a ship, and too weird to process calmly. The Central Intelligence Agency called it the Caspian Sea Monster and began watching it closely. It turned out to be an echronoplan, a ground effect vehicle that flew on a cushion of compressed air just above the water. The Soviets imagined these beasts carrying troops or missiles while staying low enough to avoid radar. The largest model, the KM, was the heaviest aircraft in the world for more than 20 years. It looked like someone glued wings to a cargo ship and screamed, "Trust me." The program faded after a crash in 1980, but the monster was very real. 18. East Germany's Stasi created one of the most invasive surveillance systems ever built, and then somehow found a way to make it even creepier. Smell jars. Agents collected the body odor of suspected dissidents and stored it in sealed glass containers. They stole dirty underwear, wiped cloth on chairs after interrogations, and even used devices to capture air from private homes. The samples were labeled and archived, like a bureaucratic nightmare pretending to be a perfume laboratory. The idea was to give trained dogs a scent trail if someone tried to flee or disappear. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, investigators found rooms filled with these containers inside Stasi facilities. Thousands of jars, each holding the personal smell of a human being the government had decided to monitor. It is hard to imagine a more disturbing symbol of state control than a dictatorship literally bottling its citizens. 19. The Soviet space program produced astonishing achievements, But behind the heroic posters was a propaganda machine that treated inconvenient people like stains on a photograph. When cosmonauts died in training, were expelled for misconduct, or fell out of political favor, the state often did not simply remove them from the program. It removed them from memory. Official photos were retouched. Group portraits were republished with vanished faces. Training records were altered or hidden. Grigory Nelyubov, once part of the original cosmonaut group, was dismissed after a drunken incident and then erased from official images as if he had never stood beside the others. He later died tragically, while the public remained unaware of his earlier role for years. This happened to multiple figures around the program. The Soviet Union did not merely classify failures. It edited the cast list of history and airbrushed real people out of the space age. 20. In 1942, with Japanese forces moving through Southeast Asia and Darwin under attack from the air, Australian military planners quietly considered a plan that would have written off a terrifying amount of their own country. Later known as the Brisbane Line, the idea was that if Japan invaded, Australian forces would fall back and defend the industrial heartland between Brisbane and Melbourne. Everything north of that defensive zone, including towns, farms, and millions of square kilometers, could be abandoned. Lieutenant General Ivan Mackay submitted the plan, and Prime Minister John Curtin officially rejected it. But the fact that such thinking existed caused a political explosion when the story leaked. The government denied and argued about it for years, and a royal commission investigated the claims in 1943. Few wartime secrets are more uncomfortable than a government quietly asking, which half of the country can we afford to lose? 21. During Prohibition, the United States government faced a stubborn problem. People were stealing industrial alcohol, redistilling it, and drinking it in speakeasies. Instead of reconsidering the policy, officials chose a strategy that belongs in a villain's notebook. They pressured manufacturers to make industrial alcohol more poisonous by adding substances like methanol, kerosene, and other toxic chemicals, fully aware that desperate drinkers would still consume it. The logic was horrifyingly simple. If enough people became sick or died, maybe others would stop. Newspapers openly reported that the government was increasing poison content. This was not even a secret whispered in a smoky room. It was public policy with a body count. By the end of Prohibition in 1933, thousands of Americans had died from poisoned alcohol. The government's anti-drinking plan was basically, make the booze deadly and hope the lesson lands. Shockingly, it did not work well. 22. In the early 1960s, the United States military created Project Iceworm, a plan to hide hundreds of nuclear missiles beneath Greenland's ice sheet. The public cover was Camp Century, a scientific Arctic research base powered by a portable nuclear reactor, complete with tunnels, living quarters, a chapel, a barbershop, and a movie theater. Very wholesome, very chilly, very suspicious. The real dream was to carve more than 2,500 miles of tunnels and place 600 nuclear missiles aimed at the Soviet Union. Small problem. Greenland belonged to Denmark, and Danish officials were not told the nuclear missile part. Even nature rejected the idea. The ice shifted constantly, crushing and warping tunnels until the project became physically impossible. By 1967, it was abandoned, leaving waste and secrets under the glacier. Decades later, declassified documents revealed the truth. Denmark learned that an ally had tried to turn its territory into a hidden nuclear launch pad. 23. As the British Empire lost colony after colony in the mid-20th century, officials launched a secret cleanup operation called Operation Legacy. And by cleanup, they meant destroying evidence before newly independent countries could read it. Colonial officers across Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean were instructed to identify files that could embarrass Britain, expose abuses, or support legal claims. Documents were burned, dumped at sea in weighted crates, or shipped to a hidden archive in England that was not publicly acknowledged until 2011. Records linked to torture of Mau Mau detainees in Kenya, abuses in Aden, and other colonial operations were deliberately removed or destroyed. The instructions were blunt. Do not leave behind anything embarrassing. The empire that once bragged the sun never set on its territory spent its final years making sure the paper trail disappeared before daylight hit it. Not exactly the graceful exit advertised in schoolbooks. 24. South Africa has one of the strangest chapters in nuclear history. It secretly built nuclear weapons, then secretly dismantled them. Under the apartheid regime during the 1970s and 1980s, South Africa developed 6 working nuclear warheads, with a 7th under construction. The project was so classified that even many senior military figures were kept out of the loop. Then, as apartheid began to collapse, President Frederick Willem de Klerk ordered the weapons taken apart before the transition to majority rule. The warheads were dismantled, the enriched uranium was returned to controlled storage, and the facilities were stripped down. Only in 1993 did de Klerk publicly reveal the program, after the arsenal was already gone. The political message, whether spoken plainly or not, was hard to miss. The old regime preferred to destroy its nuclear weapons rather than let a black-led government inherit them. South Africa became a nuclear state and then a non-nuclear state, both under heavy secrecy. 25. After World War II, NATO and the Central Intelligence Agency helped build secret stay-behind networks across Western Europe under the umbrella name Operation Gladio. The official idea was that if the Soviet Union invaded, these hidden units would emerge from bunkers and weapons caches to fight as guerrillas behind enemy lines. Italy, Belgium, France, West Germany, the Netherlands, Turkey, and other countries had versions of these clandestine forces. Many elected officials had little or no idea what was operating inside their own borders. The secret survived for more than 40 years, until 1990, when Italian Prime Minister Giulio Andreotti confirmed Gladio in Parliament. Then the scandal spread across Europe as governments discovered or admitted they had hosted armed shadow networks for decades. Some groups were later linked to political violence and terrorist incidents, which made the whole operation far darker than a simple emergency plan. Europe had not just hidden weapons, it had hidden armies. 26. From 1962 to 1983, the United States ran Project Storm Fury, an attempt to weaken hurricanes by flying aircraft directly into them and seeding clouds with silver iodide. The public goal was disaster reduction, which sounds noble. But once a military starts poking hurricanes with chemicals, the obvious question appears. If you can weaken a storm, could you steer one too? Pilots flew into some of the most violent weather on Earth to drop seeding material into hurricane eye walls, hoping to disrupt the structure. For years, the project chased the dream of weather modification like a government-funded wizard trying to argue with the sky. Eventually, scientists concluded the method did not work. Hurricanes already contained too much natural ice, and supposed successes were probably just normal storm behavior. The project ended quietly, but the fact that officials spent 2 decades trying to control hurricanes is exactly the kind of history that keeps conspiracy theorists fully employed. 27. In 1967, during the Vietnam War, China launched a secret military effort called Project 523, named after its start date, May 23rd. The mission was to find a treatment for malaria, which was devastating North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces. Hundreds of Chinese researchers were mobilized, including a pharmaceutical chemist named Tu Youyou. Scientists searched modern chemistry and ancient medical texts, because when soldiers are dying, apparently even dusty manuscripts get promoted to national security assets. Tu found a reference to sweet wormwood in a text more than 1,600 years old, then developed a method to extract artemisinin, a compound that proved extremely effective against malaria. Because the work came from a military project, the discovery remained secret for years. The world did not immediately know China had found one of the most important anti-malarial drugs in modern medicine. Tu later won the 2015 Nobel Prize. A classified wartime project accidentally helped save millions of lives. 28. In the late 1970s, the French government became tangled in a scam so embarrassing it was locked away like a radioactive clown. an Italian-born television repairman named Aldo Bonasoli, and a man presenting himself as an Italian count, convinced officials at Elf Aquitaine, France's state-owned oil company, that they had built a device that could detect underground oil from an aircraft. Just fly over land, and the magic machine would sniff out petroleum. Elf executives bought in hard, signing a deal worth 200 million Swiss francs while accepting the inventor's suspicious demand that no independent scientists examine it. For years, the aircraft flew over known oil fields and magically confirmed what executives already knew, because the fraudsters were being fed location data in advance. By the time the scam collapsed, Elf had lost over $150 million. A repairman and a fake aristocrat convinced a modern state that an airplane could smell oil. 29. In 1591, 8-year-old Tsarevich Dmitry, the youngest son of Ivan the Terrible, died in Uglitch under circumstances so suspicious they helped drag Russia into catastrophe. The official investigation was led by people close to Boris Godunov, the powerful figure many suspected might benefit from the boy's death. Their conclusion was almost insultingly absurd. Dmitry had been playing with a knife, suffered an epileptic seizure, fallen forward, and accidentally stabbed himself in the throat. A child, a blade, a seizure, and a perfectly convenient fatal neck wound. Sure, almost nobody believed it, but the authorities defended the story because admitting murder could collapse the political order. The cover-up failed anyway. Later, multiple imposters claimed to be Dmitry, miraculously alive, and their claims helped ignite the time of troubles, a brutal era of famine, civil war, and foreign invasion. One ridiculous official explanation helped crack open Russia's nightmare decade. 30. Hatshepsut was one of ancient Egypt's most successful pharaohs. She ruled for over 20 years, expanded trade, launched huge building projects, and brought stability. Her one unforgivable flaw, according to later political branding, was being a woman who had done the job extremely well. After her death around 1458 before the Common Era, her stepson Thutmose III began a campaign to erase her from history. Workers chiseled her name, face, and royal titles from temples, statues, and monuments. Cartouches were recarved. Reliefs were scraped away. Statues were smashed and buried. The goal was not just criticism, it was deletion. Egypt's government tried to make it look as if a female pharaoh had never ruled at all. For thousands of years, the plan largely worked, until 19th century archaeologists began reconstructing the evidence. Imagine being such an effective leader that your successor's main project becomes pretending you never existed. 31. In 1990, Switzerland discovered that its famously calm, neutral government had been hiding a secret paramilitary organization called P-26. This was not a normal army unit with paperwork and tidy democratic oversight. P-26 recruited members quietly, trained them in hidden facilities, and stored weapons caches across the country. Its mission was to organize resistance if the Soviet Union ever occupied Switzerland. That may sound like a spy thriller with alpine scenery, but the scandal was that Parliament had not properly authorized it, and many elected officials knew little or nothing about it. When a parliamentary investigation exposed the group, the public reaction was furious. Switzerland had spent decades presenting itself as orderly, transparent, and neutral, while a secret armed network operated in the shadows. P-26 was quickly disbanded, but the damage was done. Even the world's most famously neutral country, it turned out, had a secret army hidden in the basement. 32. In the 1920s and 1930s, the Japanese Imperial Army chose Okunoshima, a small island in the Seto Inland Sea, for a top-secret chemical weapons factory. Workers produced mustard gas, phosgene, and other agents there, while the government handled secrecy with a very subtle method. It removed the island from official maps. During that period, Okunoshima simply vanished from Japan's printed geography. Workers were sworn to silence, and many later suffered serious health problems from chemical exposure. After World War II, the facilities were dismantled, and the island was abandoned. Then history took the weirdest possible turn. Today, Okunoshima is famous for hundreds of friendly wild rabbits roaming the island and charming tourists. Their origin is debated, but many people connect them to animals used around the old chemical weapons program. A place once erased from maps for poison gas is now marketed through adorable bunnies. History has no chill, so now you know the rule. When a government says, "Nothing unusual happened," that is usually when the rabbits, the missing nukes, and the secret underground armies start showing up. Hit like if at least one of these made you question every official statement ever written. Subscribe for more history that escaped the shredder. And now, start the fight in the comments. Which government secret did we criminally leave out? And which one in this video sounds the most fake but somehow is not?